Hello and welcome to The Art of Aging, which is part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from the Ruth Frost Parker Center for Abundant Aging and United Church Homes. On this show, we look at what it means to age in America and in other places around the world with positive and empowering conversations that challenge, encourage, and inspire everyone, everywhere to age with abundance. As part of our Aging and Innovation series, we're very pleased to have Max Zamkow on the show today. And we're going to be talking about venture capital and Agetech. And man, I can't think of a better guest than Max. Max is the managing partner of Third Act Ventures. That's an Agetech specific venture firm where he invests in founders working to change the way that we age. He also serves as the editor-in-chief of Agetech News, which is the only complete source of fundings, exits, and opportunities in the world of Agetech. And because he has a singular focus on Agetech, Max is able to support and empower visionary entrepreneurs to accelerate the pace of innovation in aging and make the world a much better place for us as we all age. So welcome, Max.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I'm going to start with a question we ask a lot of people on the podcast. I mean, you could be putting your talents into a lot of different areas. You could be doing venture capital in sports drinks or oil and gas, or why are you so passionate about the world of aging and Agetech?
Sure. For me, like many entrepreneurs, it originally stemmed from a personal experience. And then, the combination of being able to both do good and make money was quite enticing. So, going back almost 13 years ago now, I was living out on the West Coast where I am now. My grandmother was living on the East Coast. My whole family's from there. And she just reached that point in her life where she couldn't live by herself anymore. My grandfather had passed away. The house she was in was too big. She was all by herself. She had a couple falls, all the things that happen to us generally as we get older. Finally, my father and his siblings, my aunts and uncles, they hit their breaking point. They said to my grandmother, we're too worried about you. We have to find you somewhere safer, better for you to live. Let's start looking at facilities. So they started that process. They looked at a bunch of facilities up and down the East Coast, picked one near my uncle in Massachusetts, moved her in, and were excited. They were happy, or at least relieved, that finally they would not have to worry as much. There'd be care all around her. They'd be taking good care of her. She'd also have friends around to be able to have this community, be doing all these things. They were very hopeful. But what actually happened was quite the opposite. She just really struggled to connect, and she really struggled to settle, really. As soon as she walked in those doors, she just became a shell of herself. She basically stopped eating, stopped sleeping, wasn't engaging with anyone. It was really jarring and so different than how she lived the rest of her life. And I could tell just from a phone call how bad it was. And that's when I jumped into action. Back then, my whole world was mobile. This was when the mobile revolution was just kind of getting going. I was working in early stage startups as an engineer, CTO, founder, all in mobile. And so I started looking around for ways that I could help from afar. And since my world was mobile, and because mobile changed the way that we interact with computers to the point where they don't come with 100-page manuals anymore. Like toddlers, I have a 16-month-old at home. She knows how to use my phone. It's really impressive. In my mind, there was no reason why my grandmother couldn't be using it too, even though she wasn't very good with technology, unsurprisingly. So I started looking around for things, where's the app for my grandma, or the app for the staff or nurses to help take care of her, help do something. And was just really surprised at the lack of anything. There was really nothing that existed. And that really saddened and frustrated me. And as I continued my entrepreneurial journey and started to try to figure out what to do next after my last startup, I checked back in on this field of Agetech and saw more happening, which was good. But the more that I dove in, the more I realized that, the two biggest impediments were just not enough entrepreneurs building for the space. And for those that were, very few, if any, sources of early stage capital to help them get off the ground. And in addition to that, I saw, the population aging. I saw how there was certainly opportunity for venture capital scale companies to do well here. And so the combination of all three of those made me decide to jump in head first.
That's quite a story. And, you know, I mean, that mimics so many of the entrepreneurs that I think that we see in this space, with just that passion, that personal experience driving the need for change. And it's very purposeful work too, isn't it? You know, you really feel like you're helping people with this. And when was Third Act first established, Max?
So I made my first investment in the space somewhere around like 7-ish years ago. You know, the name, I think I started using it somewhere closer to like 5 to 6 years ago, maybe. I was using a different name while I figured out what the right term for this industry was. We didn't call it Agetech back then. I was trying to coin like Silver Tech was better than what was before, which was like Elder Tech or Jaren Tech, both of which were bad. And then I finally had this epiphany. I'm like, okay, like Third Act, like that's something that people are not offended by. I think it kind of nicely describes what we're investing in. So that's kind of where it was born.
Yeah, and you've got quite a few investments. You know, for any of the listeners that are just purely listening and can't see Max right here, you know, we can see a lot of the organizations that he's investing in behind him. We've got, you know, just, and this is October of 2023 that we're recording this session here. So I see things like Pear Suite, I see Kobu, I see Care, I see Labrador, which a lot of people are talking about. I also want to just say that this is a great lesson for people in logo design. Because these are the ones that I can read fairly easily behind you. So just a word.
Some of them you can't. So yeah, they don't get mentioned on the podcast. They should think about that next time.
It's like people who design flags, but they put like words on the flags and slogans, and basically it's like reading a postage stamp. But you know, there's really a variety of things and you know, there. I mean, just from different types of solutions, and I want to get into that in a second. But just for people that may be new to the venture capital space, I think it's fair to say that you're investing in early stage companies. Can you let us know just how are companies typically categorized when it comes to venture capital investment?
Sure. Typically, they're categorized by, you know, what their last round of funding was and who it was from. You know, you hear things like pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B. And again, that relates to how much funding they raised, and not how much so much as like how many rounds. The way that I think about it in the early stage is that there's really like, you know, there's an idea on a napkin stage. There's like that time between on a napkin and you're building and launching. Then there's, you know, post-launch and everything after. So, you know, idea on a napkin is like just starting. You call yourself you're nothing at that point. You're just an idea. You're an idea stage. After that, up until you launch, you're kind of a pre-seed. And then once that seed has started sprouting, once you've launched, then that makes you a seed company. And then comes all the series. Series A is like after you've launched, you've gotten some early traction. And now you can go out and raise, generally nowadays, it's between like $5 to $10 million. Series B is then the one after that, which is generally 10 to 20, 25. And then C, D, E, just keep going like that. So that's generally how they categorize. In my world, I really just care about that seed. That's generally where we invest, which is where the product is launched. And they might just have a couple customers. It could just literally be 2 pilots turned customers that we can talk to.
Right. And I suspect that you must get at least one company a month coming to you saying, "Hey, Max, I've got a great idea." I'm joking. I'm sure you have like one a minute coming to you saying.
I was going to say one a month. I would not be doing a very good job on my deal flow if I was only getting one a month. One a minute is closer. That would be a little intense, but somewhere in between, yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, but you know, there's a lot of folks out there that would love to get some FaceTime with someone like you, and I think that part of this podcast is really meant to provide some guidance to those entrepreneurs. These are and you know, I work with a lot of them. I'm always happy to talk with folks that have these ideas, because it really does come from the heart, and we are, to your earlier point, just facing this huge future state of need with the growth. I mean, I look at every single problem that the solutions behind you are looking to address, and I'm just thinking in 10 years we're going to have 10 times the number of people that are going to be exposed to those problems. And so, so between the economic promise and then also the purposeful aspect of this, it's just this kind of this wonderful kind of place to land. But I'm sure that there are things that you see that pique your interest. There are things that you're that may say no to right off the bat. I mean, from in your mind, what are the things that make a project investable to you?
Sure. That's a really good question. Again, I will preface this by saying that every investor is different. We're like snowflakes. Everyone looks for something different. Even other seed stage investors may look for slightly different things, but there are some general things that all VCs need to see. Those things really pertain to the opportunity size, the market, and the scalability of your solution or potential of a solution. You need to remember that VCs are also companies in themselves, and they have their own investors. They are kind of startups. And so they have a responsibility to return money to their investors in a certain time frame. So there are many companies that have been very successful that were bigger than many VC companies that took longer, and that's perfectly fine. But VCs need to return money to their investors. That way we can raise another round and invest in more companies. So the biggest things are, again, making sure that the market is big enough. VCs invest in incredibly risky companies, and they fully expect to lose money on most of them. They expect most of them to return basically nothing. But they do need a few of them to basically hit like out of the park home runs. Like they have to be grand slams. They call them fund returners because one investment returns the entire amount of capital, and if not more, that you raise from your investors, which is kind of crazy. So every company that a VC invests in has to have the potential to do that. Most of them don't make it, but they have to have that potential. Otherwise, it's not even worth taking a swing at it. So they have to be able to return the fund. billion-dollar companies are sometimes bigger depending on the size of the fund. The second one is scalability, because it has to do that in a certain time frame. General VC funds are about 10 years long. Depending on when the VC invests in you, that it could be 8 years from the end of that. It could be, if it's right at the beginning, a full 10. But they need to return that amount of capital by the end of that. And so a company that takes 20 years to build, that's too long for a VC. VCs need to exit quicker. 10 years can be a long time. It can also be a short time. So the company has to be able to, reach that point where they can return the fund, and they have to be able to scale there within 10 years. And really, it's probably closer to 6 years in order for it to make sense for VCs. Again, like lots of other options to finance companies, many companies very successful without VC funding. There's this phrase that VCs like to use, which is that they sell rocket fuel. They don't sell jet fuel, which is also pretty fast. They don't sell regular fuel. It's rocket fuel. And if you take VC money, you need to know that you are along that ride, and that's how you're going to get pushed. And you need to, in many cases, kind of go for broke, which is kind of a nuts way to build a business, but obviously it is successful for some.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking now about just the, I'm seeing Max, you're starting your day, you're getting on the computer, you've got a bunch of decks to go through. And let's talk a little bit about maybe just presenting the idea for a second. We've had your colleague Tessara Thomas on the show, we've had Andy Miller on the show. I think we picked up some things about you don't need to tell me, you don't need to put the baby boomer age wave slide in the deck, right? I know the baby boomer age wave slide. I know that you're going to put a competitive grid on there, and you're going to be in the top right-hand corner of that grid, or you may think you don't have competition, and guess what? Maybe you haven't looked hard enough. Are there any sort of things that come to mind that you like? You see these decks and it's like, oh my gosh, why are you doing this? Or I wish you would have said that. Are there any, just presenting the idea in general?
You know, I don't get as upset as maybe others when
These
like
guys are not upset, by the way. I'm not saying it's just.
No, I know.
Yeah.
They are just things. Listen, I understand that, you know, fundraising is a numbers game, and it means you need to send that deck out to a lot of people. So in some ways, it needs to be general enough to work for even investors that may not know the space. So putting in a slide that talks about the 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day in America, perfectly fine. You know, I'd say the biggest faux pas that I see are companies that don't first explain the actual problem that they're solving and the magnitude of it. You know, they kind of jump into their solution or the team, which is fine, but what exactly are you doing and like how important is it? Like, sure, you use AI in, you know, electronic health records, but so what? Like, what, that doesn't mean anything to me. Like, what is that actual problem that you're solving using that AI, and how big of a problem is it? So you can talk about 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day. That's great, but what problem are you solving for them, or solving a problem that is caused by that population change? So that's, you really need to hook an investor initially with, you know, a problem that they can understand and a size that's big enough. And again, that comes down back to what we were just talking about, market size. You need to hook them on that, the fact that this is a big problem and there's a big opportunity in solving it.
And you know what's coming into my head now, Max, is just this sort of that human-centered design principle of falling in love with the problem before you come up with a solution, right? And I guess it's do you generally find that those that do lead with the problem, that really do fully understand, have fallen in love with that problem, generally come up with better solutions?
Yes, but not necessarily right away. Okay. Because often it's the first solution that you come up with is often not the best solution. And people that are in love with the problem instead of loving their solution are willing to entirely scrap, remake, try a version 2 of the solution, which, you know, generally you improve every time you try something, and you're improving because of, you know, feedback from individuals, from the market, from changes in regulatory landscape, whatever it is, you know, versus people who are in love with their solution and don't listen to, you know, their customers or what's happening. And so they make one solution, and in all likelihood, the probability of an individual coming up with the perfect solution their first time is really small. Mm-hmm. But if the probability of one person coming up with the best solution trying 100 times, that's much more likely. So it's not about, you know, someone's design sense or knowledge of the problem that first out that really separates them initially. It's whether they're willing to listen to what is happening, listen to the market, and be willing to totally remake their product. You know, one company in the portfolio that literally just did that is CareSwitch. They literally like remade their entire product years into it, because they realized that what they needed was different, and the way that they needed to build it for particularly this new AI revolution to take advantage, they had to totally scrap the previous product and rebuild it. Right. And what has emerged is really exciting and strong. And, you know, companies do this all the time. You know, they entirely scrap a product and rebuild it. And you think of like Apple and Steve Jobs, the amount of times that he tried to like eat his own product. You eat your own company. That's kind of how companies stay on the cutting edge.
You know, and again, we are recording this in October of 2023. We talk about the market dynamics, things, AI revolution, all these new things that are affecting change in the market. But when we're talking about, this world of age tech, what are you particularly fascinated by these days? What's sort of getting you curious, or where does your, I don't know if I'm framing this question right, but what are you curious about right now?
Yeah, I think you're framing it perfectly fine, Mike.
Okay.
I'll tell you the thing that I'm excited about, or excited to see kind of how it plays out, is really the value-based care and the different ways it's coming about. The one that's really interesting and novel, or we're still figuring out, is how value-based care and seniors housing can play together. I will be honest, when I first entered this field, I thought that seniors housing was part of the care continuum. Like, I thought that that's why people like my grandmother moved into a facility, is because they needed more like medical care, and that was being provided at an assisted living facility. Didn't realize that that's not actually the case, but now it seems like we're starting to get there. And it makes sense because senior housing providers, they are providing care. It may not be traditionally medical as we previously defined, but now that we finally admit that all these other things, we call them social determinants of health, affect our health, lifespan, health span, like those are things that senior housing providers are affecting: food, heating, transportation, community, all these things. And, why shouldn't they be participating in these value-based care arrangements? If they can help keep an individual healthy longer, they should be benefiting from that. And you'd think that the health insurer would provide that incentive. So I'm really excited to see how that is enabled, how it plays out, how we're able to make that work. Just like anything, I'm sure there will be some failed attempts. That's kind of how innovation happens.
And thank you for that. You're obviously, speaking my language here for where we sit here at United Church Homes. We know that us and our peers, especially in the nonprofit housing space, have just been for decades through know-how experience have been just keeping so many people out of the hospital and supporting people in a very person-centered, holistic way. And yes, I think that we are at the stage that we can get our due, and it's a very exciting time to be in this industry. So thank you for that recognition. Is there anything that you think has been overdone in age tech? Too many solutions out there, or maybe just limited new cuts on the solution that may not make it worthwhile for another entrant?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that anyone thinks of when their parent falls, which is often how many people start to think about this space, is like, oh, like if they were wearing a smartwatch or a smart wearable, then like they wouldn't have been on the floor for so long, or maybe it could have predicted before they were going to fall and could have stopped it. I can't tell you how many smartwatches I've seen. A few weeks ago, I was at Aging 2.0's Optimized Conference in Louisville. There were multiple there. I was just at Health last week. There were lots. There are lots of smartwatches. They all do basically the same thing, and they don't really solve the big challenge that smartwatches, wearables have, which is that generally people don't want to wear them. And older adults especially don't really want to wear them because they don't like being tracked. It's the same reason why they don't want to wear a Life Alert pendant. Less than like 1% of the people who would actually benefit from it end up using a Life Alert, because every time they put it on, they're, basically admitting to the world that they are old and frail. And I don't care how old and frail you actually are, that's not how you want to be made to feel every day. Not to mention all the challenges with charging and remembering to put it on and yada, yada, yada. So don't need more smartwatches. Or maybe we just need the one that actually people want to wear. You can figure that out. That's great. I think the best one we have right now is the Apple Watch.
Right.
Or the best fall detection or detection device we have, or like Life Alert, is, an iPhone, is a smartphone.
Sure.
Because that's something that everyone, including grandma, grandpa, older adults want to have in their pocket, and that's generally what they have in their pocket. And you can use that to call people if you fall. So that, you know, the most successful ones are probably out there already. You need to be doing something a little bit more unique and different.
You know, I want to get into this idea of maybe just, you know, platform solutions versus individual solutions when it comes to aging, you know, age tech. I think one of the critiques I've heard is that there's a lot of, it's very fragmented right now. You know, you have a, I know it's over, you know, but, you know, fall detection solution, or you may have another type of monitoring device, or you may, it's sort of like if I wanted to put together a holistic set of solutions, I'll have to cobble it together from 5 or 6 different vendors. And, you know, and we're seeing platforms getting developed, particularly, you know, online engagement platforms, content platforms, lots of different things can hang off of that. But would you agree that the space is too fragmented?
I would not agree that it's too fragmented. It is fragmented, but, you know, that's also in many ways a good thing. Like, there are platforms out there that try to do everything. You know, generally that's like the point click care, and there are a few others too that have an EHR and have a CRM and have a this and a that. And most people that use point click care, those solutions only use a very small subset of the features because they're all average. Like, if you try to do everything, we call that in VC boiling the ocean, you're not going to do any one of those things very well, and certainly not many of them at the same time. Right. So you're kind of in that search for, you know, that single unified platform. You're sacrificing expertise, essentially. You're sacrificing quality, and you're willing to live with mediocrity. And listen, if that works for you, more power to you. That's great. But if you want to work with the best solutions, you need to find people who focus just on that. Just like, you know, if you're surrounding yourself with a team, are you going to surround yourself with one person who knows everything kind of okay, or a bunch of experts who are all experts in their particular field, right? It's exactly the same. And yes, like, it would be easier if you could combine the best in class of everything into one unified platform. Like, what a dream, right? You have this, right. I mean, again, back to this team analogy, like, you have this one right-hand person who just does everything from accounting to sales to, you know, your personal assistant to cleaning the floors. Like, yes, it would be wonderful if you could just hire one person to do it all, but that's just not how things work, and no one person would be able to do all of that at that level. So you need to use many solutions, many people, if you want to be the best. And again, like, I think people fall in love with that dream of, like, it would be nice if it was just one. Like, sure, it would, but it also, like, that's not a viable solution. It's not a viable option for most.
Yeah, and you know what comes to my mind now, Max, is that, you know, when I see these type, when I see multi, you know, like products with 100 features to them, oftentimes they'll add those features because a competitor has it and they want to have it parity. Mm-hmm. And what seems to get lost is going back to that idea of falling in love with the problem. You know, it's like, you know, what are, I have a system that can do 100 things, but for me or this particular customer, what are the 2 or 3 things they do most often? And how did you optimize the solution so those things are really easy? I mean, typically, if somebody works in that, I find that if somebody works from that mindset, I find that the UX is a lot cleaner, it's simpler, it's more intuitive, mm-hmm. and that's the product I'd like to use, right?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And you need to not only think from that direction, but also, like, going out and watching people use that and interviewing people using exactly that. And only by doing that and really focusing on that one piece of the problem or one problem can you really become an expert and make a UI that is so clean and easy to use. Again, you try to do that for everything, and you're only going to get a little bit of info on everything, and everything's going to kind of get jumbled.
You know, let's turn just to you know, because no one's ever done a podcast on AI before, so I want us to be the first one. But when you think about AI as you think about AI as a disruptor, where do you think the application of AI may offer the most benefit or the most surprises when it comes to age tech?
That's a good question. I think on the benefit side, really, we're going to at least initially see the biggest benefit coming in any kind of form, filling out, data input, as well as kind of complex scheduling and rescheduling. These are things that AI can do really well. You give it, you say you have 100 people schedules and a whole bunch of people that need care. AI could pretty quickly figure out like what the different best arrangements are. And you can even change the parameters in there depending on, how you want to rank, whether it's more important that someone sees the same person more or just that you minimize distance. Like AI is way better at that than someone looking at some gigantic Excel sheet of like 100 people. Like there's no way that a human can do that nearly as well as a computer. So I think we're seeing it there. And the other place, again, is anywhere you need to fill out forms. If you're filling out forms, whether it's for Medicare reimbursement or government regulatory forms or EHR, I think we're going to see AI, and we already are starting to see it be able to kind of take is just a free form visit, a recording of whatever the interaction was, and pre-populate a lot of that. I think we're still going to want people checking it for a while, but it's going to take out a lot of that kind of manual busy work that, for doctors, that's all the charting that now they do at home, and allow people to focus on the actual interaction, the care, which is, I think, wonderful.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you because I know that at least in the work that we do, I mean, we do regular assessments with our residents, with our clients. I don't want my person having to just type into something the entire time. And we already are seeing this in medical transcription. I think there's a number of solutions there. It seems to be becoming common practice in medical transcribing that you're no longer sending this transcription to a third-party service to interpret and coming back. The AI is essentially, doing that for you. And I think that, we had Victor Wang on the podcast as well, and I love what he says about, geriatrics is all about complexity, and AI it tends to be good at making sense of complex things. And as I recall, there's a number of these assessments out there. Like there's ones for fall risk, for social isolation, for social determinant needs, for engagement. But they all seem to be siloed. And I'm hoping that AI will have the power to kind of crosswalk between the two, so that we can say things like, I fell because, or I'm more, I'm feeling more depressed. I'm depressed because I fell last week, where those two things might have been separate. Now you can combine them together, and there might be some really intriguing new insights that can come from crosswalking all those data points. I'm not sure if you're seeing the same thing, or if you're seeing companies out there that really do get more into kind of the slicing and dicing of social determinant or data of that type.
I'm not sure I'm seeing anything in terms of like really being able to cross-pollinate that well, although I think that'll happen. What I think we are seeing are tools that will help prompt these responses if, like, say you haven't gotten the information, or there's a follow-up piece that, like, maybe given something that they said, you need to ask that you didn't or didn't realize. And so instead of having to, have a follow-up phone call or visit, like it can just say, hey, like, Mrs. X said that they're not feeling great, ask if they've been taking their new meds, or, if they have been skipping meds, or whatever it is, that can make it much more natural and make the process more smooth. I really like this idea of the AI being able to make these more conversations instead of like question answer, like form filling out. It's important that we have standardized assessments, because otherwise how can you really understand the difference between one person's risk and another? However, it's not a natural way to converse and really to connect with someone is through like filling out some standard form, whereas having conversation about it can really change the dynamic and change that interaction in a way that feels so different, particularly to the recipient and the carer themselves, and really create that bond, which is what, so many are trying to do in the senior care space. Is, we talk about how caring is so personal, and I'm really excited about how AI can kind of help bring that back in many ways, especially to all these tests and everything else.
Yeah, and especially for us in the senior housing and senior care space, where our differentiator versus the medical world is so often the trust that we build with people so that they can open up. We can have those conversations. Adding in a formality to that just takes us back a step. So I share that same aspiration. Hope that will be adopted. Max, you've been very generous with your time. I thank you so much for the advice and for the perspectives that you're giving myself and our listeners. And we do like to end our podcasts with 3 questions about your personal experience with aging. And I hope it's okay if I ask these of you.
Of course. I mean, if everyone does it, I can't say no, can I?
Can't say no. No, you're forced to. Yeah, you can't turn your computer off. But before we get into that, where can people find you? Where can we find out more about?
Sure. LinkedIn's LinkedIn's a great way. I'm trying to be more active there. For more on Third Act, you can go to our website, thirdact.vc. And then also the other place to follow along is agetech.news. And again, that's our monthly email newsletter that chronicles all the financings, exits, et cetera, in Agetech. Anyone that wants to learn more about this space, what's going on, financings and acquisitions are a good proxy for kind of what's working and what things are hot. So it's definitely a pretty good thing to be following along with.
Very good. So that's agetech.news. And thank you for that, Max. Okay, we're getting into our 3 questions. Okay, we got question number 1. Max, when you think about how you've aged, what do you think has changed about you or grown with you that you really like about yourself?
Sure. I mean, for me, the biggest one is just being more comfortable in my own skin. For those that are listening on the audio version, you don't see, but I am a redhead. Not only am I a redhead, but I spent, half of my childhood from 10 to 18 in the UK, which was really interesting. But it meant that I stood out even more. So I sounded different. I looked different. And, as a teenager, all you want to do is fit in. And I really struggled, unsurprisingly, with that. And one of the best things about growing older, or how I've changed, is how I've just gotten much more comfortable being myself and looking like myself and not really caring so much what other people think.
That's awesome.
At least on that front.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And then the second question is, what has surprised you the most about you as you've aged?
I think the most surprising part is just how emotional I am and continue to be. You think of this traditional, stereotypical model of particularly being a man is like you start as a child and you are emotional, you have tantrums, and then you grow up and you're kind of stoic and nothing moves you. Now, fortunately, I think that paradigm, we've been busting through it a lot in these last, few decades, which is good. Real men do cry. It's okay. It surprised me how often I do it. Especially now, as I said, I have a 16-month-old at home, Maya, and it's silly, but it's amazing how often I just tear up. I can't tell you. I went to this class of hers that she'd had. It was like this toddler sound and experience class. It was nothing, right? She did this for 5 weeks. I went to the last one. All they did was sing and clap, and it was fun. But I went to this and the teacher said, all right, you're all going to get your graduation certificates. And at the beginning of class, I'm rolling my eyes. It's graduation certificate for doing what?
Right.
Exactly. And then at the end, the teacher comes around and gives us this envelope, and I look at it, and I literally just start bawling. Like, fortunately, I was wearing sunglasses, but so filled with emotions. Like, I don't know, like, Maya's growing up, and I'm so proud of her, but objectively, subjectively, I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So it's definitely been quite surprising.
That's very, very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that story. That's awesome. And then our third question is there someone that you've met or someone that's been in your life that has set a good example for you in aging, like someone that's inspired you to, as we say at United Church Homes, age with abundance or age abundantly?
Yeah. So there is, a few years ago, I was lucky enough to meet Gary Player, the golfer. And he is an absolutely incredible person and an incredible model for aging, and how just the way that he continues to approach life. He had a very challenging upbringing, grew up in South Africa in challenging times. And there are a lot of things that could have stopped him early in his childhood, midlife, and then getting older. Yet he still, every year, is at the Masters, hitting that opening shot, and he dominates the other guys that he hits with.
Max, and thank you very much for lending your time to us. We're very privileged to have had you on the show. And most importantly, thank you to our listeners. Thank you for listening to this episode to The Art of Aging, which is part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from the Ruth Frost Parker Center and United Church Homes. And we want to hear from you. What are some of the age tech ideas that you have in your head? What's most compelling to you? Who has inspired you to age with abundance? And really, what ideas do you have for topics on this show? We want to hear from you. So visit us at www.abundantagingpodcast.com to share your ideas. You can also give us feedback when you visit the Ruth Frost Parker Center website at unitedchurchhomes.org/Parker Center. And reminding everyone to check out Max and Third Act Ventures, especially subscribing to the Age Tech News at agetech.news. Again, thank you for listening. We will see you next time.